Mauser has made a straight pull hunting rifle with a new and unique design that's exceptionally smooth, light and quick to use. It also produces exceptional accuracy. Rather than working on existing concepts from other straight pulls, Mauser's designers have come up with some novel concepts for its new Model 25 that bring worthwhile outcomes, yet they've managed to keep the price at the lower end of the scale for rifles like this. The Mauser 25 is a strong entry into the market, but also cheeky. Mauser's late into the scene, and so has had the luxury of time to look at what everyone else has done and try to outdo them. It's all part of Mauser's grand plan, its stated goal of dominating the lower part of the market with its range of turnbolt and straight pull rifles. We'll see how they go with that one though. The last time, indeed the only time, Mauser made a straight pull was the short-lived Model 1996, which was later made for a while by Rossler. But the Model 25 is nothing like that. The action is entirely dependent on a block of a chassis, milled from a solid piece about 26 centimetres long. Two rails cut into the upper edges of the chassis, except the bolt carrier. Contact of the carrier with the rails is delightfully light, so that the carrier flies along them like a bullet train. The rails also guide it with accuracy. There's minimal scope for sideways or vertical wobble, just slick movement fore and aft. To get the bolt moving backwards, you only have to move the bolt knob about 13 millimeters and the assembly is released to slide. Cycling is amazingly quick and very smooth. It's also very light, the most resistance being when you strip the bullet from the magazine. The bolt handle's position, which is adjacent to the trigger, reduces any necessary hand movement from one to the other. The design asks absolutely minimal input from you, which helps you get on or stay on target more successfully. It does all this reliably too, with not a single misfeed or hang up during the whole test. Now the bolt lockup system is very clever. This one doesn't use a rotating bolt head. Instead, it bears a vague resemblance to the Blaser and the Savage systems, which both rely on designs that flare radially inside the full 360 degrees of the receiver. Blaser uses 14 lugs to do it, Savage uses 6 ball bearings, but Mauser opted for 2 huge locking lugs and a wedge. The wedge, which is set inside the bolt assembly, pushes lugs outwards into battery. It continues forward after the lugs have reached the limit of their travel, spreading them apart in the final few millimetres of movement. When the bolt handle pivots fully forward in that same movement, it locks the action solid, and the only way that you can open it again is to pull rearwards on the bolt handle. Mauser says the contact between lugs and receiver covers a greater area than the 2 front lugs on a Mauser 98 bolt, providing great strength, which is an admirable boast given the 98's reputation. The receiver walls are about 5 millimetres thick, providing further confidence. If a case fails, there are 2 large gas ports, one either side of the receiver, to vent the gases. The cartridge head sits 3 millimetres inside the recessed bolt face, which encircles it almost completely. There's a 4 millimetre cutout to allow for the little extractor claw. Ejection is handled by 2 bare springs protruding from the bolt face, and that's a setup that looks unfinished and a bit untidy, but it works well. It throws cases clear, or if you extract slowly, it just drops them nearby. The way the bolt head is pinned to the bolt body and the way the bolt handle is mounted make it look like the Mauser could be capable of calibre swaps or changing from right to left-handed, but neither is actually the case. There are, however, left-handed models available. The 25 uses a tiny hammer, only about 25 millimetres long from its pivot point, to hit the firing pin. The hammer pivots inside the trigger assembly, which in turn is pinned into the chassis. The sliding safety catch works by holding the hammer down and preventing it from flying forward. The very simple trigger engages directly into a cutout in the back of the hammer's head, with nothing else to interfere with its exceptionally smooth, quick and crisp release. Trigger pull weight is adjusted via a screw that you access by putting a jeweler's screwdriver down inside the safety here. The only awkwardness with that is that it's almost impossible to do it if you've got a scope mounted, unless you've got a really short screwdriver. The adjustment screw has limits of travel both ways, so you can't over or under tension the spring. The test rifle's trigger could be set anywhere between 750 grams and 1100 grams. The single stage trigger is so sweet with such positive feel and no creep that I was happy to set it light. From pull to pull, there was never more than 50 grams variation in let-off weight, and usually much less than that, which is remarkably consistent. The hammer's short movement, encouraged by a noticeably strong spring, is very quick, and I'd venture that the lock time in this rifle is extremely fast for this kind of mechanism, and it's comparable probably with the speed of a good turnbolt's striker. Inside the safety slide, there's a pop-up bolt blocker to prevent the action from being opened when it's cocked and unsafe. To override this when you're emptying the chamber, all you have to do is push it down with your thumb as you pull back on the bolt handle. When the Mauser is not cocked, you can open the action at will, regardless of whether or not it's unsafe. Now, the bolt assembly is covered by a plastic shroud which hides its many components. It gives the rifle a slightly bulky look up here in the back, despite the stock spanning only 5 centimetres wide underneath the action. On the inside, the size of the chassis block leaves a narrow well for the magazine, which is only a single stacker, and that's possibly the only disappointment I've found with the rifle, the only real disappointment. The 3-round polymer magazine protrudes 14mm below the stock, and the optional 5-rounder hangs a bit lower still. It's all well made with a firm spring and 2 release tabs on either side of its front section. These twin tabs prevent accidental release, but they fall perfectly between your thumb and forefinger so you can intuitively grab them and pull the magazine out. A pair of action screws thread into the bottom of the chassis, running through brass bedding blocks that appear to be threaded into the timber of the stock. The chassis has good contact on the precisely insulated interior of the stock. All up, the 25 is a very solidly bedded rifle. The test rifle is the max version of the 25, which has a thumbhole stock of laminated timber with a comb riser. The extreme and pure versions offer choices of sporter stocks in either polymer or walnut respectively. The max costs a little more than the others. The laminate is very pretty if you like character in your timber. The wood is coarse grained, each layer laid at right angles to the next, and the effect is quite eye-catching, and more so since the glue between the layers appears to be transparent, so it doesn't create the dark lines that you get on some laminates. It's also fairly dark with a matte finish. The Max's pistol grip is steeply curved to a more upright angle, which suits prone or rested positions better, but is still comfortable when used offhand. Length of pull is 36 centimetres. The fore-end is deep but not wide, and the sharp checkering is easy to hang on to. Many people will appreciate the cheek riser because the scope mounting setup elevates the scope just a little higher than on most rifles, and the higher comb will help you get your eye lined up more naturally. However, you need to lower the riser before you can remove the bolt assembly, and that requires a Torx tool, so it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the field. It'd be nice to have knobs on the riser's retaining screws instead. The Max weighs 3.6 kilos and is well planted as you aim, whether on a rest or offhand. Even with the firmish recoil pad, the 25 tames the kick of a 308 to easily manageable levels. The sporters weigh 3.2 kilos, but you shouldn't feel much more boot and will enjoy the lower mass when you're hunting and carrying it around in the bush. The scope mount attaches to the receiver with 2 bolts and it hangs back over the action. The rifle was supplied with the Picatinny mount, but saddle mounts and rail mounts are also offered. This rifle also had the Minox RS4 scope mounted in Mauser rings, which are really neat things. Their mounting clamps are sprung so they open outwards as you release the mounting screws, which in turn are tidally countersunk to sit flush and ensure everything is perfectly centred. I'm not certain they work any better than run-of-the-mill rings, but they're a more elegant solution which is less likely to come loose. This Mauser shoots like a demon. After getting it on paper, the first 3-shot group I fired using Sierra's Game King 165 grain factory ammo measured just 8mm across, or less than 0.3 MOA. It was no fluke either, with 4 of the next 5 groups averaging 11mm and just 1 shot pushing the 5th group to 32mm. Normally you'd be stoked with a 32mm group, which is 15th over 1 MOA in a hunting rifle, but it felt like that one wide shot was a flyer. The Mauser shoots all 308 bullet weights well, from 130 grain up to 180. It qualifies as a genuine sub-MOA rifle, and looking at the results, I have no doubt you could quickly find a hand load to average less than a half MOA. The Mauser's handling characteristics all help you get the best out of your own potential for accurate shooting. I made clean kills on running game and at distant game beyond 200 metres. The lovely trigger release, the overall balance and stability, the way the Max tames recoil all work in your favour. Above all, there's the fast, super fluid action, which comes into its own when you need a fast follow-up shot because you can be back on target so instinctively. The Mauser 25 is like many other great hunting rifles in that it works very well. But for me, what sets it apart is the fact that it is such a beautiful thing to use.